Hi, today we're going to be making butter. We are going to be actually making sweet cream butter. You can make cultured butter from true traditional buttermilk. It's a little more time consuming to do it that way. I've found that the sweet cream butter is something that I can throw together really quickly, and I kind of prefer that because I don't need multiple gallons of buttermilk, which are required for making cultured butter. Cultured butter is a really nice product, and you can't typically find it in the store. So if you're interested in putting forth some extra time, that's a really nice product. But we're just going to do sweet cream butter, which is also amazing if you make it from your own cow's milk. You can also make this from just heavy whipping cream that you buy from the store if you don't have access to non-homogenized milk. At this point in the milking season, my cow is giving large amounts of cream, way more than what a gallon of whole milk would contain in it. She's Jersey, so they do produce a lot of cream. What I'm doing with each gallon after the cream rises to the top, I pour off about half of that cream and I'm using it to make butter. And I've still got essentially whole milk, even with that amount of cream removed, just because she's producing so much cream. So this is a very simple process, only takes a few minutes. All you need is heavy whipping cream, whether it be from your own non-homogenized milk or buying heavy cream from the store. You can do it either way. And then salt, if you want to salt your butter, but you may want to leave it unsalted for baking purposes, so that's optional, and a good blender. That's all we need. So stay tuned and I'll show you how to make butter. All right, so what I have here is 5 gallons of fresh, raw, non-homogenized milk, and I want to show you the cream line on this milk. And this one's not as heavy of a cream line. This one's a little bit more pronounced. So you see that about 1/3 of this gallon is cream. That's way over the percentage for whole milk. So once these are cold and all the cream is at the top, we're just going to pour off about half of the cream. And I use these little quart containers to pour it into because 1 quart is what I can get into my blender and manage to make butter. Sometimes the cream will come out in a big blob, and sometimes it'll be a little bit thinner. It really just depends on if it's been shaken since it was put in there. So if it hasn't been shaken since you put it in there, it tends to come out a little bit globby. These 2 half gallons have been shaken because they're a couple of days of milk. So whenever I have over a gallon of milk, I start filling up a half gallon. All right, this one should be clumpier. Yeah. See how thick that is. This one's not been shaken since I put it in there. Okay. And I'll be making cheese with all of this milk. So this is kind of my routine. When I make cheese, I pour off half the cream and then use the rest of the milk for my cheese. I found that a lot of times in cheese making, your cream or butter will float to the top and not really get well incorporated into your curd. So a little bit lower fat, I feel like I'm being less wasteful. And I kind of rotate the milk, trying to get just the cream off the top, so I don't pour quite as much milk in there. There is going to be some milk poured in there. Not a big deal. Once we make butter with this, the butter will float to the top and the milk will be at the bottom. It's not a problem at all. This cream is really yellow because my milk cow Georgia is grazing grass all day. So compared to store-bought milk, where the cows are mainly fed silage, our girls graze all day, and it affects the content of their milk and cream. So this butter will come out bright yellow, not like anything you would get from the store. Okay, so that's it. We've got just a little over 2 quarts of heavy cream, and we'll get started making our butter. Okay, so we're going to put our heavy cream into our blender. And again, about a quart is where you want to be, because this is going to puff up, and if you fill this blender up, it's not going to work out for you. You're going to lose the cream blown out the top of your mixer if you overfill it. So really, your blender should be filled about halfway. All right. Make sure your lid is securely placed on your blender. And we're going to start it off low. One of the things on knowing when your cream has turned to butter, you're going to see this really start expanding as it turns to whipped cream. And then once it turns to butter, that expanded level will start dropping. You'll see a significant, all of a sudden it starts dropping back down to a lower level, similar to where you put it in there at, the volume that you put it in there at. Once it starts dropping, you're almost there. Just pay a close attention, and then you'll start seeing separation of your milk and butter in your milk. As soon as you see that, you've got butter. Turn your blender off. You don't want to chop up your butter into lots of tiny little flakes. It's harder to manage. So as soon as you see separation of the milk and the butter, it's ready. So let's go. This will be a little noisy. I'll try to mute it in the video. We start off low, just so it doesn't slosh all the way up to the top, but you're going to need to speed it up some. Total time using the blender is probably about 5 minutes total. I've tried making butter in the KitchenAid stand mixer, and that can just go on for hours and not get the butter. The blender is the best tool for making butter quickly. Okay, so at this point we are just past whipped cream, but not to butter. And you can see this line here, because this was all the way up to here, and it's dropped just a little bit, but we're not quite at butter. I want to show you the consistency. It's like a thick whipped cream. So it holds a little bit of form, but it hasn't reached the consistency of butter. It's like a thick whipped cream, a buttery whipped cream at this point. So we're almost where we need to be. So we're just going to watch for it to drop a little bit more, and then it's going to separate. Always start off on low so you don't slosh so much of this up to the top. But you can see it's blending much thicker now. See it continue to dry. Pretty normal as it gets thicker and it's almost at butter. I'm going to knock this cream back down in here so we get all of it made into butter. This is the consistency that it is right now. So not quite butter, but definitely beyond whipped cream. Watching very closely for separation now. See the wateriness of the milk and the separation of the cream. Clearly separated now. We'll just double check. Yep, we've got butter. Okay. And you don't want to overdo this part because it'll chunk up your butter too fine, and it's not a there's nothing wrong with the butter. It's just harder to form it once you've got it chunked up real fine. So let me show you what we have here. And that's the butter. It's a big glob floating on top of the milk. And I'll show you how we're going to get that out and form it up and get it salted. Okay, so what you need now is a bowl of ice water. I usually do one that's super cold and one that's not quite as cold. This one will really numb your hands up, but it gets the butter nice and cold and brings it together. Make sure your hands are sanitized because you are dealing with your hands during this process. So I'm going to get this butter out of here. This made a lot of butter in this 1 quart of cream. So typically out of 1 quart of cream, you can get about 2 cups of butter. And this is probably about that much. Now this milk here is what they call buttermilk, although it's not cultured buttermilk. So don't throw this away. You can use this in cooking. It's basically skim milk. You can actually drink it. My daughter drinks it. All right, so now our butter's in this ice and we want to bring it together. Now the ice water serves a couple of purposes. It's going to cool our butter down so we can get it formed. And it's also rinsing our butter because there's still a lot of milk in this and you don't want milk in your butter. You see all the milk coming out of it. So by the time we're done forming this and done washing it, all that milk will be out. And you'll have lots of little flakes of butter around in your water. It's not too difficult to just scoop them out of the water and get them kneaded into your ball as you're washing. Some people don't use super cold ice water like this. They just use water to wash it. I find that the butter melts on my hands and sticks to my hands real bad if I don't use super cold water. So that's just my preference. But you can use cool water, but not ice water, and that's perfectly fine. That's why I have the second bowl that's not as cold, but I do like to use cold water. I'm just grabbing little pieces that are floating around. I've got several more batches to make, so I'm not going to be super concerned about all the butter that's in this container. I'll work on getting every little dab out on the pieces that I'm making without a video, so it's not as cumbersome to watch. But you do want to get all your butter. You've worked hard for it. So I said 2 cups for a quart. I meant a cup. I apologize. This is about a cup of butter. 2 sticks is what I was thinking in my mind when I said 2 cups. So that's 1 cup of butter per quart. And you might get a better yield if you're using specifically heavy cream from the store, just because when I pour off my cream, I do get a decent amount of milk mixed in with it. As you saw, there's still probably 2.5. So this is probably a cup and a half, and there's probably 2.5 cups of the buttermilk remaining in the mixer. So I'm looking to see that there's no more milk coming out, and I still have a little bit coming out. So we just keep washing this and kneading it together. Still milk coming out. We're going to move this over to our other bowl now that it's fairly clean. And my fingers are very numb. And this is just my second wash. It gives me a better idea because this bowl is full of milk. So this one I can see that the water's washing pretty clean, and I know that I don't have a lot of milk solids left in my butter. Now, the reason you don't want all those milk solids, well, it's not butter, but it will also burn when you melt your butter if you're trying to use it to, say, toast some bread or something. So you got to get the milk solids out so you don't have that spoiling, oh, not spoiling, but burning. It will spoil your butter faster as well if you have a lot of milk solids left in there. Now, butter, when I make it like this, we will go through one of these in about 1 to 2 weeks, and that's perfectly fine in the refrigerator. If you make quite a bit, like I'll be making 3 batches like this today, I will freeze them because I already have some of this in our refrigerator that we're currently using. But butter freezes super well, so you can freeze it, just date it so you know what you've got, and whenever you need it, pull it out. Now we're going to salt our butter, and typically I use plain salt in most of what I'm making with regard to dairy products. This is actually iodized salt, and it really doesn't matter in butter. So don't beat yourself up about using iodized salt in your butter. It's perfectly fine. You can use plain salt if you prefer it. I just happen to have this sitting on my counter, which is what I'll be using. And I'm not a fan of unsalted butter. I know that it's used a lot in cooking, but I really like salt, and it's probably not a good thing, but unsalted butter, so plain to me. I really like the flavor of salted butter, especially in fresh cow's milk butter. So you see how yellow this is compared to butter you buy in the store, which can sometimes be almost white. And that's just based on the cow's diet. So store-bought butter comes from cows at commercial dairies, and they're fed specific diets. You are able to get some what they call pasture milk. So those cows get out and get grass a certain percentage of the day. But our girls are out 100% of the time grazing. We feed them a little bit while we milk them, but this is the butter. And actually it was brighter during the middle of the summer compared to now. So this is actually toned down a little bit because we're getting some reduction in our green grass at this point. Okay, that's butter. I'm going to show you how I wrap it up and store it in the freezer. So I put my butter on wax paper. This is actually dry wax paper, which I like a little bit better. It'll absorb any of that little bit of moisture that is still left on the butter. And then I just wrap it up. And I double wrap it, so one more piece of wax paper. Just like that. You can tape it if you like, but that's going to go into a Ziploc freezer bag. I usually put 2 of these per freezer bag, which equates to usually just a little over a pound of butter. Pop it out of the freezer into your refrigerator whenever you need it. Very simple. The milk was, or the cream was in the blender for about 5 minutes, as I said, so this was a real quick process. I did this in about 20 minutes to make this butter. So definitely something that you can do at home. It doesn't take a lot of skill. It's very quick. And you can even do it with store-bought cream. So if you don't have the fresh milk, you can still have fresh homemade butter.